Aloha and welcome back, and thank you to everybody who's sharing and liking and subscribing to my channel and spreading the videos. I can't thank you enough, and of course those contributing to Patreon, thank you very, very much. I wanted to discuss Palestine in brief and some of the latest developments there, starting with the Jerusalem move, the U.S. Embassy being moved to Jerusalem. This was always going to be very provocative. The predictable consequences were the kind of increased tension and strife, violence. At least 20 Palestinians have been killed since that time. I'm not sure what the exact number is now, but in excess of 20. Of course, they don't really count, do they? This is too small a number for it to really register in the consciousness of most of Western civilization. So this was always predictable and provocative. We also saw during that process with we saw in that process the threats, open threats against nations around the world by the United States with the comments about we're taking names and we're not going to forget this, and all open threats literally against so-called sovereign nations who didn't basically go along with the program and vote in support of the move to Jerusalem, or at least abstain, not vote against it. What can I say? That's the empire gone mad. You know, this is kind of a good thing, really. You know, in fact, it is a good thing. It's only exposing the criminal nature of the United States government, the treasonous nature of that government. And now what we saw is Ahed Tamimi, this beautiful 16, 17-year-old lady, young lady. She's just gonna kick ass on Israel right now. Israel's caught between a rock and a hard place. You know, this little 16-year-old girl just slapped your Israeli right in the face, your chosen one, slapped by, you know, this subhuman in the eyes of so many in Israel. Make no mistake about it, you know, these little terrorists like Ahed Tamimi don't deserve any kind of compassion, and to have one of them slap one of our chosen ones in the face is beyond unacceptable in the eyes of most. So the Israeli authorities are not going to win no matter what, because if they keep her in for any extended period of time, it's only going to increase the awareness and the anger vented towards Israel and the United States for its support. So love and respect to Ahed and her family. What can I say? There's the Palestinian people for you. They're not going to back down. They'll never give up. And then what we saw is on the back of these open threats against nations that don't cooperate, obviously the Palestinians didn't cooperate sufficiently, and as a result, the United States is withholding, I believe, $62 million worth of aid to UNHCR, the refugee program for the Palestinians. The situation in Gaza, I really couldn't elaborate more than what so many have done, but let us suffice it to say that even the UN report on the uninhabitability of Gaza in short order 2020 is not an exaggeration. When I was there, lived there for 6 months in 2011, it was horrendous then. It's much worse now. They have mountains of garbage, sewage, open sewage in many parts of Gaza. The drinking water is just completely not drinkable at all. Electricity is very short in supply, and kids are malnourished, anemic, all sorts of things. They're on a diet, as the Israeli authorities said. They're on an Israeli-Egyptian imposed diet. Let us not forget that Egypt has a border with Gaza, and that border is closed. So it's an Egyptian-Israeli blockade of Gaza. And now the United States is withholding $62 million, which is pretty much a lifeline for many in Gaza, because they don't have the ability to rebuild the factories, to develop their infrastructure, to produce and to import and export as required to live a dignified life. They simply cannot do it. It's not that they're not capable in and of themselves, but the circumstances simply do not allow it. And now the United States is withholding $62 million, which literally means that under these circumstances, starvation in Gaza is going to become a very realistic possibility. Malnourishment will certainly increase, and children, the biggest targets of these types of policies, are going to suffer the most. So in response to that, Belgium has decided to instantaneously transfer 23 million. That's a noble thing, I have to say. But once I heard about the U.S. withholding this aid, not to be cruel, just understanding the insidious nature of so-called aid, I immediately knew that this was a good thing. If things haven't changed, the Palestinians are the #1 recipient of aid per capita in the world. If not, they're at the very top of the list. And that's been the case for many years now. So how is that aid working for the Palestinians? Well, it's not working very good, is it? How is it working for the enemies of Palestine? Well, I'd say aid's working pretty good. If you don't understand this game, it's very, very insidious. But it's no harder to understand than, if a loan shark lends you money, he wants his money and interest. There's no secret about that. So when you get aid, it almost always has strings attached. If you get U.S. aid or from the big Western nations, so they'll do things like, for instance, these aid organizations can pay higher salaries to Palestinians than Palestinians can pay in the private sector. So you suck out a lot of the best talent into these agencies. And then once they're in these agencies, which are all to a certain extent controlled, even just by nature of the blockade itself, they have to cooperate with Israel to some degree. And there's very few aid agencies that really spit in the face of Israeli authority because they need some level of cooperation. But there are some very, very legit charities and aid organizations, but the vast majority of them are nothing more than infiltrators. And so they'll control the dialogue, so that one of the top priorities in Palestine is, gay freedom, homosexual issues. Obviously that's important. There is reasons why people should be, more sensitive and open and compassionate towards everybody who is in a minority group. But it's certainly not a Palestinian priority to be dealing with those issues. But the aid agencies are the ones paying, well, then they can direct those issues. This is just one example of what it is in aid. I'd say welfare in the United States is another example of where, you've got a welfare culture that has suffered deeply from having aid. Just psychologically, when you're not able to provide for yourself and are relying on so-called aid, it's very demeaning. It has a psychological impact which is very negative. If you have to live on aid for a short period of time in the aftermath of a natural disaster or something like that, there's no shame in that. But when you have to live year after year after year after year on handouts, it will have a negative effect on you. And this is knowing policy as well. I have felt this way for many years. I spoke about this on Hard Talk.
You used to be a U.S. Marine. You've moved quite a long way from that.
Thank God for that.
You burnt your American passport.
I renounced my U.S. citizenship formally because I do not agree to the terms of citizenship. I refuse to pay into a tax system that's being used to commit mass murder, war crimes, and crimes against humanity.
Your anger, how will you use it next?
Based on love, and that's why I do what I do.
How will you use it next? What will you do
I've been
next?
involved in a project called Aloha Palestine, a social enterprise intending to do safe trade with Gaza, to bring in items counter to what Israel is getting from Britain and the United States, weapons of mass destruction, small arms and things like that, to bring in safe trade items such as things that are needed for the civilian population to live a decent life. And that is a problem that we need to address in this world, is the absolute lack of the Palestinian people to exercise self-determination, and living on aid is not the answer. So my focus is trade. And if I can't be the director of that company...
What about the other side? Because a lot is focused on the import, getting stuff into Gaza. Surely the best thing for the Gazan people would be to allow to export all that they do.
Yeah, and they have millions of carnations that they could be exporting, and they feed it to livestock because it's not allowed out.
And so you can see, you know, I do not believe charity is the answer. I believe charity is equivalent to putting a Band-Aid on a gushing wound that's bleeding profusely. Charity is necessary in times of emergency, but charity as a result of just innate human policy, whereby the blockade of Gaza predictably causes tremendous human suffering, collective punishment for around 1 million children as well as the rest of the population. The predictable consequences of a policy like that is that aid is going to be necessary. We should be dealing with the root of the problem. And the root of the problem is that the Palestinians are not capable of taking care of themselves because they don't have the ability to travel freely. They're not allowed to have an airport. Their seaport, which was being built and funded by the EU, was destroyed by Israel and shut down. So they don't have shipping lanes and shipping traffic that would be necessary to be independent. They're not able to exercise their rights, and you know, they're constantly under the threat of bombardment when they try and build their factories. The factories get destroyed, you know, and no import and export ability. This, to me, is the issue, and that's why I spoke about it on Hard Talk, and that's why I worked on this issue for several years. I mean, nonstop. I was studying international trade. Not because I have any love for international trade, but because I listen to the Palestinians, and they're not asking for aid. They're asking to be able to live a dignified life, and they're asking us so-called allies in the rest of the world to do something meaningful to help them exercise their freedom and to be able to stand on their own 2 feet. And in order for that to happen, they will have to be able to import goods and export goods. Now, I had this plan, Aloha Palestine, Trade Not Aid, that was based on this understanding, because I know now, and I knew then, aid is not the answer. Trade is what's necessary. I initiated this plan based on my listening to the Palestinian people, and it actually had huge potential. It was going extremely well. But infiltration and subversion from within, along with the UK police being employed to arrest me, but never charge me on spurious allegations that had no merit whatsoever, but put a cloud of doubt over my head so that the mission could effectively be destroyed. I actually wrote a 100+ page report on this. There were over 100 exhibits, emails, screenshots, receipts, communications of various sorts, all verifying the fact that the people who had actually stolen property had stolen it in a subversion attempt that clearly achieved its goal. So I failed. I'm not meaning to make excuses. I failed to do what I needed to do to protect that mission, and ultimately it got halted. However, I have compiled years of work, including very valuable legal opinions in both trade law, which was very critical for us to get a legal opinion in trade law, and I have an amazing legal opinion from a major London law firm, which is powerful. We also got legal opinions in international human rights law, also hired the services of a shipping broker to be able to give me real costs on what would be the cost of a ship, operating costs, insurance, fuel, everything that you would expect. Paid a proper shipping broker to give that breakdown and assess some ships that were available at that time. A tremendous amount of other work looking into the Euro-Mediterranean Partnership, the trade agreements between the EU and the countries of the Middle East. And all of this work is extremely valuable, but when the mission got subverted and effectively halted, and I spent 1.5 years defending myself, I decided to basically halt at that point. But this work is there, and I should have done this a long time ago, because now that the issue of Palestinian aid is coming to the fore again, I really want people to finally listen to the Palestinians. Never mind me, listen to them. They are insisting on something that is absolutely necessary, the ability to be able to import and export and conduct trade. I'm sorry, there's snow plows going out there, so forgive the sound. Once the Palestinians have the right to trade, import and export, make no mistake, they're going to be able to take care of themselves. They'll no longer need our so-called aid. That is a real solution. It deals with the root of the problem. and it's no longer putting a Band-Aid on a gushing wound. So I'm going to make this work public soon. I'm going to put it out there, open source, but I have to get rid of private information. You know, I can't have people's private phone numbers and sensitive information released. So everything that I can release in terms of legal opinions, the shipping broker, accounting issues, research and treaties, and all of this sort of stuff, I'm going to make public, open source, and I hope, for real, that we in the West do a trade mission, a significant trade mission, with a company registered in the EU, employing the strategy that I had worked on and that I had consulted with many experts on in the process of developing. It is extremely powerful and necessary. Charity is not the answer. And in this case, trade will provide everything that the Palestinians need. And I want more than anything to see my Palestinians be able to, Palestinian brothers and sisters, to live a dignified life. And if we do what we're capable of, that is exactly what's going to happen. And it's going to happen this year or very soon, that's for sure.